here on Comcast Hometown Network.
You know, there are very few people who legitimately can be called pioneers in an industry, but one of them is our next guest. Welcome, Jim Gabbert.
Hey, David, thank you very much. You know, it's funny, I've never been on this side.
I was about to say, you're the only guest I probably have had in a long time where I don't have to talk about what a TV studio is like.
Do you realize that I have been from 1957 to today, I have been on radio and TV in San Francisco 54, 55 years now.
Wow.
And up until KGO changed format about a year ago, it was continuous.
Yeah. Now, I mean, you've seen the whole gamut from the golden age to, well, whatever we are in now, silver age, bronze age, I don't know.
I'll tell you, there's a lot of changes coming because, like, for instance, with Comcast Cable, when cable started, it was some little, guy up like in Walnut Creek with an antenna on a mountain feeding people television because they couldn't get a signal. Look at it, what it is today.
Now, for people who don't know your history, tell us, where you came from, how you got to the Bay Area, and what got you started in the crazy world of TV.
How much time do you have?
It's a long show, so yeah.
Okay, no, but I'll try and keep it short. I was raised in primarily Latin America. My dad was in the Foreign Service, the American ambassador to Costa Rica, then head of the AID program, Foreign Aid. And so I lived in El Salvador, Paraguay, Chile, and primarily Costa Rica. That's where I went through my teenage part in high school and all. And I had an appointment to Annapolis. I knew something was different with me. And I didn't quite know what it was, but I knew in the Navy I didn't have to deal with whatever that was.
Yeah.
And so I had an appointment to Annapolis. And a radio station moved in my junior year in high school. A radio station moved about 2 blocks from where the embassy compound. And I started hanging around there. I said, hey, this is pretty good. Because I had 2 older brothers that were like football players and all, and I had skinny little arms, so they, kick sand in my face all the time.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, at this radio station, I just loved it. I looked at it and said, this is great. So I bought an hour a night. I paid for an hour a night and did an English program because there were 35,000 Americans in Costa Rica. And I had a brother at West Point. They would get all the latest hits from the States on diplomatic pouches. And the microphone became my alter ego. It became my muscles. And all of a sudden, I went from in high school to big man on campus. And then the #1 radio station didn't take very long. I think I was on for about 4 or 5 months. I bought that hour. I sold 15-minute segments for each 15 minutes for what I paid for the hour. I didn't do it for money, but it made money.
Yeah.
And
you were an accidental entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly. Then the #1 radio station came to me, so I did afternoon drive in Spanish, 4 to 7 in San Jose, Costa Rica, in my senior year in high school, and I was a big disc jockey then.
Because now you were raised bilingual, so you're fluent in English and Spanish.
Spanish was almost my first language, pretty close to it.
So like when they had all those magazine ads, for Charles Atlas, lift weights and, get strong, your weight was the microphone.
It was a microphone, yeah.
When did you realize that you had a talent for this? Was it right away?
No. Here's what happened. I did not have, this kind of radio announcer voice like Gary Owens on Laugh-In. I didn't have that. So I decided that I would be me. And if you look back on television, like a Dick Cavett, when he used to do, Dick Cavett had a facade. You couldn't get past that.
You didn't know who the real guy was.
Right. Johnny Carson, the Johnny Carson on television and the Johnny Carson sitting right in front of you, same person. And those were the people who made it work. And I picked up on that real quick.
Yeah. Now, who was the first person to come to you and say, Jim, you got a talent for this?
Nobody.
So still wait for someone to tell you?
No, there was a book. It was an Arbitron rating book.
Yeah.
In other words, the ratings were everything I've done on radio and television has had phenomenal ratings.
Right. Now, start out with radio. What brought you here to the Bay Area? And let's talk about the station that you made famous, and certainly probably is most identified with you, Coffee.
Well, actually, before that is now what is Star 101. That we put on when we were my first partner. I think you had on this show not so long ago, Jerry Gilo. The two of us met at the I went to Stanford, changed my major. Annapolis went bye-bye, and I became an electrical engineering major, and then started working at the campus radio station. Then I worked down in San Jose at KEEN as a Spanish disc jockey on weekends, and also down in Ventura. I'd drive down, this before PSA Airlines, and you know, so drive down every Friday and disc jockey the weekend in Ventura, and then drive back.
Wow.
And in the senior year, Gary and I decided we wanted to build a radio station, and we didn't know what FM was, not a clue. But so we looked for AM stations everywhere, went to the FCC in San Francisco, and the guy leans back like this and says, well, there's 15 FM channels in San Francisco. All you got to do is file a piece of paper, and you got it. So we picked 101.3 because of the highway. And each of us, the initial investment was like $2,000, which I didn't have. But we had the guy who owned the real estate, and he gave me the $2,000 as long as I was up on Skyline driving tractors, pulling logs out and putting them on trucks. And that was the start of it. And that station, it was perfect. All the AMs were on top 40. Mom and Dad couldn't figure it out. You know, this is horrible. It's the end of America, and everybody's going to have sex out and drugs. That happened years later, but at the time. So that led to what started as KPEN for Peninsula, 1,500 watts on Kings Mountain, back of Stanford. Today, that's Star 101, 125,000 watts, and one of the top stations in the market.
Now, after the radio stuff and you got into TV, you know, before we started filming, you said, we did everything wrong, and everyone said, you can't do it this way.
Right. Well, here's what happened. We bought radio stations. I bought all the partners out, and they were convinced I would fail because I was very shy. Hard
to believe.
I know, but even as late as 1970, I'd have to sit there and look at your shoes and talk to you. And then you know what I realized one day? You are as screwed up as I am, we're all screwed up, so get over it and let's go. And all of a sudden it went click. I didn't need Dale Carnegie or any of those classes or anything. So we had radio stations in Honolulu. We had, then we had an AM here and 2 FMs, and all of a sudden, everything was like number one. And it was boring. All it did was make money, but it was boring. And one day, Channel 26 had been on the air for about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, brand new. And we went to them and said, we want to do a promotion called Watch Your Radio. So we had 5 cameras in the K101 studios, broadcast on 26. And here it was UHF in 1980. The station was brand new, and we got more response off of that than we've gotten off any radio
And of course now that's become kind of a standard thing now, TV and radios, you know, watching the DJs in the morning bring on guests.
So then we decided to buy Chemo, Channel 20, which needed therapy. They called it, chemotherapy. So we worked out a price, and we had that kind of money. Then the price doubled and tripled because all of a sudden everybody saw value in UHFs. And we finally settled on a price, and the problem at that point, we didn't have the money. So let's sell the radio stations. So we sold, K101 at the time sold for the highest price ever paid for an FM in history. And it gave us, in Honolulu, was the same thing. We walked out those stations in Honolulu had 57 radio stations. We owned 24% of the market.
Wow.
And so that led to coming on with 20. And what we decided to do, we shut it down for 6 months, replaced all the equipment, and we had better cameras than anybody in town. The first digital effects from Grass Valley and all the switchers. And all. We were technically ahead of any station in the market, regardless of who owned it. And we came on like Godzilla. Coming out of Tokyo Bay.
Well, and about as popular. I mean, weren't people trying to knock Godzilla down?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, what was interesting is we did something in television nobody had ever done before. You know, on a radio station, you do these samplings. You take a group of people, and you play songs for them, and you get their reaction. We did that with shows. We hired a research company, and to our surprise, the most wanted to be watched show was Laurel and Hardy, which we got for like nothing, and Perry Mason, which is still running on Coffee TV after, 20-something years.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of people who get, accused of being popular as if somehow it's a dirty word. You embrace that right away. Programming that people wanted to see. You ask the viewers.
I learned way back in my early days of disc jockeying, people do not know what they like, but they like what they know. You ever watch a kid on the radio? Say they're driving along in the car, they don't know what the song is, they go to the next one until they realize what it is. And it's very hard to introduce new ideas. You have to do it very carefully and very subtly, and you have to use branding to make it work.
What do you think is your greatest contribution to TV? I mean, coffee has become legendary. I mean, there was a time when people didn't know who general managers were or owners of stations were. Suddenly, you're on TV there. You're there with the dogs. You're dancing. You're doing everything. Everyone knew Jim Gabbert. Were you the first to do it, or just the first to do it here in the area?
One thing that was very interesting, David, was having been on radio for years, when I first got in a TV studio, it was terrifying, even though I owned the station, and that was my studio, if you will. But you're in a TV studio, and people walking around, they've got clipboards and everything. On a radio, you're in a microphone, and you're talking to somebody. And I found it kind of hard at first to look at the camera, and you see people walking around, nobody's paying attention to you at all, and it's like, you know, how does this work? Yeah. And finally, originally I was not going to do it, but we were the only television station on in the market Sunday nights. Sunday night, that was almost our prime time. Sunday night from 12 midnight to 6 a.m. And originally we just showed movies. Didn't go anywhere. So I decided at this point, Howard Hughes was in Desert Inn, and he owned the CBS affiliate in Vegas, and he's in bed with long fingernails and all, and he'd call up and say, even in the middle of CBS programming, I don't like what you're doing, stop, and here's what I want you to do. So we made that a thing. We put myself in an old hotel room with wallpaper and a refrigerator with coils on top, you know, like out of the 20s, and cans of film all around and a dog on the bed. And I had a butler, because we were running Rhoda at the time, so we had a butler named Carlton.
You're right.
Okay, and Tails, and I'd be sitting there drinking beer. Home run. It caught on so fast.
Right. I mean, you became a brand before TV owners were branded. I mean, now anyone who's a commentator or a reporter or has their own show, it becomes about them first and then the show second. You were the first person to put a personality to a TV station.
True. If you ever noticed in the and we used to do a lot of advertising, is we never promoted shows per se. We promoted the TV station. I did one after we had become a Warner Brothers WB affiliate and had Michigan J. Frog. I did one billboard. The billboard companies weren't going to run it. It took all of the programs we had and say, here's a big billboard, and it was kind of, you know, you could hardly read it. And they said, that's dumb. Then I put it on the back of buses, and everybody had to read it. They had to go out of their way to read it, and it worked.
Now, you have initiated a lot of firsts in TV here in the Bay Area. And, you know, a lot of people, I mean, I certainly think the Bay Area is one of the capitals of TV. I mean, television was invented here, all the innovation coming out of the Bay Area. Your innovation was marketing and how to sell TV. What do you think is next?
Let me explain to you first off how that happened. We didn't have at the time like a Comcast with 100 channels or satellite TV or all of that. We had basically 7 channels in the market, and the first superstation was Ted Turner with WTBS, and it was just in its infancy. And somehow, and I ran into a newspaper article the other day, and in 1980, I turned around and said, we're going to have 30 channels to compete with someday. I think I missed it by a little bit. But we felt you had to brand your television station, because when all is said and done, you know, the viewer has a lot of choices, but as you have more choices, the more difficult it is. Have you ever been to a restaurant with your friends and there's a little peer pressure? The bigger the menu is,
the harder.
David, what are you having?
Yeah,
what are you having? What are you having? And so we felt that we could never compete with, say, a Johnny Carson or a Tonight Show, but at the same time, as you had more and more choices, we would become a destination.
You'd become the favorites part of the menu, where this is the comfort food.
Correct.
In our last few moments, talk to me about what you think is next in TV, because you're still very involved.
I think that, you know, everybody has talked about for years now, going back to I was part of the Advanced TV Committee and picking the DTV and digital television. And Microsoft had a huge influence, which led us to come up with not the best HD or high definition television, but it was made to be compatible with the internet. Convergence was the big word 8, 9, 10 years ago. It's happening. And you're going to see more and more, especially kids, that over-the-air television, like a Channel 4, Channel 5, the only thing they really have is news and localism in news. The rest of it just kind of fell, because you could find that every place. So local television is somehow, it's got its problems.
It's got its problems.
Yeah.
Last bit before we go, any advice to someone who wants to go in the TV business? a young guy like you?
What I would do is the television business itself, because you've got like here, a studio that Comcast does, and they do their programming. You've got all kinds of opportunities with the internet and television and streaming, not just working at an archaic television station. So the one thing I always talk, I've done a lot of graduation speeches at universities and all, and I turn around to young kids today. If you start out in life just to make money, and that's your only goal, you probably are going to fail. To me, broadcasting became a passion. I didn't care if we made money or not, as long as I was able to live. Well, we made a lot of money, but that was not the intent.
But more important, you had a lot of fun along the way.
Oh, did we ever? So,
thank you, Jim. Hope you'll come back on again.
I will, and thank you very much. You know, it's kind of funny because I've never didn't know how to deal with this on television.
I know, it's kind of nice to see you a little uncomfortable there because you're not shy anymore.
Thanks a lot.
We've been speaking with the great Jim Gabbert. Next up, we're going to learn about the ongoing important work of the Positive Resource Center, speaking with its executive director, Bryn Andrews. We'll be right back.